So welcome everyone. We're having our Friday webinar today. I'm Pamela Schultz, and today we're going to be talking about the graphs that are in our example files that are under the category of custom graphics. And it was actually sort of interesting preparing for this, because at first I thought, oh gosh, there's so many different types of graphs. How can I really do this effectively? So what I'm hoping to do today is to talk about how to approach these files, how to understand them, what pieces to expect in them. If you're newer to DataGraph and you're following along, I think this will be helpful from that perspective, because the graphs we've been looking at this month, or the examples, didn't have things like groups of data, groups of columns, color schemes, things like that aren't necessarily in some of those basic files. So we're going to talk about that. And in particular, types of graphs that I'm going to really get into are waterfall plots, mosaic plots, Raincloud plots, and chord diagrams. So those are the specific ones that I'm going to really kind of get into. But again, particularly, once I'll kind of get through these. Of course, you can ask questions along the way. But if there's a type of graph that you want to, or file that you want to specifically talk about, then happy to do that. So the first one that or the first file that I actually wanted to talk about is one that is kind of different. Actually, let me just make sure I want to have the chat open so that if anyone has any questions. Okay, there we go. So the first file that we'll talk about is a file. Again, we're in the custom section, and I want to look at the file called color scheme. Or actually, just if you go in the DataGraph examples and you type in the word color, there's a number of different files that will pop up that you'll see have a color scheme noted in the description of them. I know there's others in here that use a color scheme that don't necessarily have it in the description, but the file that I wanted you to look at is actually titled color schemes. And if you want to go ahead and open that file, there we go. This is a file that I actually did some editing on and did some improvements to it. So you have a number of things here. I guess the first thing is, so what do I mean when I even say color scheme? I think conceptually, I'm sure you know what a color scheme is. It's a certain palette of colors that look nice together. And if you look at the graphs that you see here, these are all different commands within the program that have a color scheme option available, where the color scheme is down here at the left-hand side. Oh, actually, let me turn on my mouse. If I had forgotten. Can you see my clicks now? Nope, not yet. Hang on one second. I really need to always just remember to do this. There we go. And so now hopefully you can see that a little bit clearer. And of course I can always do this to draw, but here's on the bottom left, what we call a color scheme variable. So what does this look like if you're not familiar with this? Well, you can see the colors here. There's a criteria that's used to match the colors. So in this file, we have a group here, a categorical column of data, A, B, and C, and you can see that the color scheme has the same A, B, and C in it. And then you see the colors. So what's really cool about this is I can click the gear menu right on the color scheme, and you get a series of color suggestions. And when I change this, notice how every graph in this file is changing, because they are all using a color scheme to define what the colors are going to be within that graph. So for example, if I go into my first one here, this is using two different commands. And another general thing I will tell you in terms of how to approach files when you're coming into a file that's brand new and you don't know what's being used. Hovering over the command will give you a pop-up. So this tells me it's a points command. This is sort of an obvious one, but this is a pi command. And in both of these, if we expand them, you'll see here within the points, here it says scheme, and you can see there's a menu where we chose the colors, and the same for the pi. The scheme is chosen there, the same one. You can call it whatever you want. I just simply had it called, it's called colors here. But again, all the commands are like that. So I can really easily have these coordinated between different graphs in order to, if I change my mind, I can then very quickly change the colors. And I'm not limited to the list that you see here. Any one of these tiles I can click on. And when I do, the color picker pops up, and I could change just a specific color within that. Let's see, what else do I want to say about this? Oh, so I wanted to show you what happens then when I add new data in, because if you have your own data that you want to put into a file like this, you could just paste it right into these 3 columns. If you already have the data formatted in 3 columns like you see here, you can paste it in. Now, what is that going to do? Well, it's going to change the categories here, because the color scheme is specific to whatever it is set up for. It's not necessarily dynamic in terms of if the names of the categories change, then the color schemes are not, it doesn't automatically update. We thought about having a color scheme that does that, but for now, that isn't the way it works. Now I want to change something, but there was an issue with the connect command when I tried this earlier. So I'm just going to delete that one there. And I guess maybe just to be clear, the titles on each of these graphs are telling you the name of the command that is being used to illustrate this. But what I want to show you is, okay, so let me go ahead and add another category here. Here's a D category. I'll kind of just set it up similar, just a few numbers, and we'll put in some larger numbers than what I have, for these other guys. So you can see numbers are being filled in. Now, let me go back to one of my standard color schemes here. So in either of these graphs now, if you click on them, you'll see how the new data may be shown. For example, you can see here there's D is added in the legend. There's a bar for D here. The box is there, but it doesn't have any color. And that's because, again, it's not in the color scheme. There's an easy way to fix this, and that is if you click on the gear menu in the color scheme variable and say unique text values, what happens is it's going to add another line to the color scheme variable itself. So you can see here's this line that got added with D there. What DataGraph does when you select this and say unique text values is it actually checks every command that is using that color scheme, checking the data that's being used in that command, and making sure that every category is shown within the color scheme variable. If you wanted to change the order of this for some reason, these are all things you can click and drag around. This would change it, for example, in if you're using a custom legend to show this, that's the way that we show the color scheme variable. Actually, I won't go into that now in the interest of time. You can go onto our help page and to the color scheme, the help page here for the color scheme, and get more information on that. But I did want to show you that once I added these new, this new category, D, I can then go back into my color suggestions, and now you'll see a group of 4 for each one. So you do have to do specific update to all the colors. And the reason we're careful with that is because you may not want to suddenly have all your colors change when you add a new category in. So you do have to specify that. Again, maybe in the future we'll have a color scheme variable that's more dynamic, but that's the way that this works here. All right, let's go ahead and continue to the next file that I wanted to talk about. No need to keep that. And that is a waterfall chart. There's two examples here. I'm going to open the second one. The first one uses a bars command to make the waterfall chart. It's kind of a cool way to do it, but I really want to focus on this one here, this example. This is another file that I've gone through and done some updating on this one to sort of improve it, make it a little bit easier. So what are the things that you see here? Well, you see that we have some columns of data, but we also have calculated values. These values that are in bold are being calculated. So each one of these rows, product revenue, services revenue, fixed variable, is represented in this waterfall chart where you see how the top of each one of these bars is showing you what the cumulative sum is as you go through this data, and then it ends wherever the total is. And the total is also shown here above. So a couple of other elements that to note here is, if I select these and open them up, you can see how this is calculated. The column for start, and this is actually very easy to set up. This is an incremental sum. So if I take my value column and I can click the gear menu or control click on the header, you can say mapping shortcuts, and there's all these different shortcuts of doing different types of, simple mathematical expressions. So here, the accumulative sum is just the name of the column followed by a dot, followed by ISUM. Again, there's a whole page on the help menu on the column properties that you can look up if you want a list of them, but that's an easy way to create them. In any case, what is this file really doing? Well, this is using the bar command. That's this command right here, the bar command. Again, if I hover over the commands that are being used for this graph, here's the bar, here's the plot command. And the bar command I love the bar command because it is, not to be too geeky about it, but I think it's a great command. It's very, very flexible, and it allows you within a row of data to specify the beginning of a bar, the end of a bar. You can also specify the width of the bar. Here, we're just keeping them all the same. And you can specify, and you can use color schemes. Now, this one is actually not using a color scheme. You don't see any color scheme here. The colors are defined within the bar command. And actually, let me just flip my view here to show this a little bit clearer to you. So if you open up the bar command, you see how there's a fill with, negative, and positive. So it's actually really set up very well to have different colors when the bar is going up from the start to the end, and when it's going down, you can change that color. So here, if I wanted my negative to be orange, I can easily change that. And if you're using, again, this file, you don't need to reset up the start and the end values. You can just paste your data into the label in the value column. Now, I will warn you of one thing, that for a file like this, if you change the name of this column, so if I just change this to data, what happened? Well, these two expressions are set up to use the column name of values. So that's one thing to be aware of when you're working with these files. So I could change this to data if I really wanted it called data, or just leave it as value and you don't have to worry about it. So again, if I came in here, I wouldn't redo these. I would just paste my data in and go on from there. And you don't even have to show the start and end columns. You can just look at the data. And often we do that with these files. We just highlight where you would need to change the data to change the file. So, and this file, as I want to really get to the next one, but this is an example of where we're doing a little bit of math to get these start and end locations of the bars, and just using the machinery of this command to create kind of a unique graphic. Another thing that you can also always do, you notice how this has a plot command in it as well. If you're not sure what that's doing, Well, just hide this graph and you can see how the plot command is just simply drawing the line that's connecting between all these bars. You really want this to have the same width as the outline of the bar itself. But anyway, I think this is a nice illustration of the way that you kind of combine these. And I'll let you, kind of peruse, I guess, the command. But maybe I should just point out one other thing. So this value here, this is using this the value column, or sorry, the end column. When you're using the bar command, that's always the top of the bar. So here what's done is also specifying the start. So these are the two, and you can see there's the column being highlighted, the start column. So that's the key thing to this, is again specifying where does the bar end. If I took away this and just had this be value, which would be the default, then it's a normal bar command, like any normal bar graph. But again, we want to have it look like this. So not hard to set up at all. Okay, so the next file that I want to go to is more complicated, without a doubt. This is the Mosaic Plot file, and this is one that was a file that we put together based on a user that asked, could you make a mosaic plot? And that was a good challenge. How would you do this in DataGraph? And if you look over here, again, something different than what a lot of the simpler files have. This has a group for input and a group for graphing. And if you want to look at the details of the input, that's also separated into two separate sections: a data section, which I can unhide and hide, and a plot order section, which I can do the same for. And then there's another section on graphing, which currently is not shown in the data table. But if you want to look at this, we can go ahead and include that. And now you see there's all these calculations being done. Now, if I'm using this file, I'm not going to go ahead and figure out how to redo all of this because it's already been done. But if you want to see how is everything calculated, it's there for you. We talked about the clients versus suppliers quite a bit the other day. And if I go into my command that's being used here and I want to know, where does this come from? What column is it actually using? I can go into my suppliers and I can see, all the different columns being used. It'd actually be helpful to just expand this out here. So then when you're looking at it, it will actually highlight the specific group here. And actually they're all this is a conditional one, so it's all coming from the same group. But anyway, you can dig in and you can find out, where those calculations are being done and how they're being done. What I want to show you, is, well, what happens if I change this data? Again, if I coming into this file, I want to use it. What is this file even doing? Well, the data that's in here currently is data on counts of people with different hair color and different eye color. And you can see this first graph tells you do not delete. This is actually doing the calculations using a pivot command. And it's simply calculating the percent frequency of each category. So this is one way you could actually visualize this data. But what the Mosaic plot does is it also scales not only on the y-axis, but it scales on the x-axis each of the categories. And you can see here is the x-axis being scaled with the width of the bars. And then if we go even further, now each of the stacked bars is also scaled. So this is this is a relatively complicated file. There's a lot being pulled together here. One thing you can do if you pick up a file like this is convince yourself it's doing what you think it should do. So I can just highlight some rows of data and just delete them. If you look just at this graph where everything is independent and I take out these two categories, you can see how now I have a simpler graph that's just showing this data. So here, now it is all showing me everything the way that it should. So I needed to get rid of the categories in this column where it defines the order that things are being plotted. So here's, again, I have my input data, I have my plot order. And if I wanted to make it even simpler, let me hide this one first. And let's just do, again, I'm going to delete, and I'm going to say only in this group. I'll delete those rows. So now I have a sort of a 2x2 matrix where I have two hair colors, black and blonde, and I have two eye colors, brown and blue. And I can just, again, to show you how this is all very dynamic. There we go. So you can see how it's representing these relative frequencies. If I make one, 50-50 between the two, then it shows me as 50-50, but it's calculating the percentages for you. So you don't have to have it in a percentage. You can have your counts of your data here, and then it will show you, again, if I look at the more traditional version of the waterfall plot, then you see the percentages shown here. Okay, and I'll let you explore that even more. There's references in this file for what this is based on and using this data. But let's move on to, okay, so I think I may have called it Raincloud Plots. There are two files here now, and the first one I'll open is this one on the bottom. And so in terms of looking through these files, and again, trying to think of some generalities that you see when you go into the custom graphics, there's really, in some ways, there's two types of files. There's the types of files that we've looked at so far in terms of the waterfall and the mosaic, where there are some calculations being done in the data table, and that helps us define locations where things are being graphed, and that it's derived from our data, but there's some computation that has to be done to get the output that's desired. Now, in this example, it's slightly different because instead what we have is a graph that is really a compilation of commands layered on top of each other. And what we've done in the file for these Raincloud plots, if you've looked at this before, again, we've updated this to try and make it a little clearer what's going on. This is a layer of 3 different elements. This was also something that someone had requested. Can you make a rainfall plot? So spent some time looking at what is I keep calling it Raincloud plot, sort of the same idea. But it's really 3 elements. You have this, you have a histogram, you have a box and whisker, where here this is actually showing the extent of the data, the min and the max. And then you have the individual points where the density of those points is just uniformly distributed below the histogram, and that's what looks like rain. So these 3 elements are just one on top of another. If I look at it in this, the details of this, let's go ahead and again swap the layout here so we can see these commands. Oh, I have to move these down a little. You can use this button here too. There we go. So again, there's some description in here, like many of the other files throughout the what we have within the program or in the examples. But what you see here also, again, is a group. So there's 3 different commands here. If I hover over this, a box command, a points command, and another box command, just with a different setting. And these 3 commands are just the layered versions of these 3 commands that you see here. So when I was creating this, I was, again, trying to pull apart each of these sections so you could see how they're layered. And, this has now been formatted nicely and it's all together. But basically, any of these commands, once you create them, you can take them and drag the command itself and drop it on the thumbnail of another graph. I can do the same thing here, the box command with the histogram type option that we talked about earlier this month, if you've been following along, and then the points. So when I first put these all together, it doesn't necessarily look quite as pretty as what I've have in the final graph, but each of these commands has little ways to tweak it. Like for example, here, this is the box. Actually, let me put a fill in this so maybe you can see a little bit clearer what I'm doing here. So just the box and whisker, I'll also just make this thicker. So there is an offset for the box command that we can use. And then there is the width of the boxes themselves. So that's essentially what's going on here. So now those are in the right place. Again, we used different colors for all these, but here you can see how that works. Now, if I want to have you just see the histogram in the box, you can see that there. But the points right now, the way I initially set these up, they're set up to be centered on whatever category I have on my y-axis. So I didn't talk about this data. There's references for this data if you want to see what this is, but this is a motion condition, and you have different emotions here. And again, this was recreating a figure that was online, but the points also need to have an offset associated with them. So if I go back into my data, and we can see here's the raw data that's used for this. There are calculations being done here as well, and what's actually happening here is this is actually kind of cute. This is a points command where some noise is added into the y-axis. So if I took the data itself, and I have here a y location, so this is the y value, then I'm using an expression to add noise into using a rand function. Again, don't have time to go into the details, but it's all documented here for you. And then there's an additional column that also has an offset. So I'm just going to change the one that's selected here to use the offset. And now you can see how these line up in the same way here. So again, some additional formatting to get it looking like you see in this figure, but essentially that's those are the building blocks. It's just creating these layers. And maybe just should point out, most of you are probably familiar with this, but when you have multiple commands like this that are drawn as a layer, the order that they're drawn depends on the order in the list. So if I want my points drawn behind my box, then I just move them to the top of the list, and then I get what is maybe sort of a cleaner look here. Quickly go through the last two files that I wanted to open up. This one is the sorted Raincloud plots. This is very similar to the last one I opened, but with an additional aspect that it has data being sorted. So when you look at the categories, this also has the entire data set that came from this study with more categories here. It shows them being sorted, and a slightly different look to way that the box is overlaying on them. And again, it's just layering of these commands, but the difference here is that there's a pivot command that's used to sort the data, and that's brought back out into the data table. So is this a complicated file? Well, I mean, there's a number of steps that are here, but it's all documented. You can see the data for the rain plot here. Again, the calculations are also shown. You don't necessarily have to look at those. It's really just these three columns. So if you have your own data, you can paste it in here and mimic the look of this, and then you'll be able to get a graph like this. Again, this uses a color scheme, so you may have to update what the color schemes look like if you have different categories, but that's easy to do. I showed you how to do that earlier. But I think this was sort of nice. When I was looking at the Raincloud plot, I thought, really what would be useful is to have one that sorts the data by category on the y-axis automatically. So that's what this does. The last example that we're going to do today is with a chord diagram. So then the file here is called Basic Chord Diagram. I'll go ahead and open this. Truth be told, I had a version of this file that I used during the live Zoom, and it had some issues with it. So I went ahead and actually did some improvements to the file to be a little clearer as to what's going on here for both you and for me, from coming back to this in the future. So basically, what do we see with the chord diagram? This is a diagram type that allows you to draw connections between different groups. And the first version here just has lines drawn. So there's points, there's labels, there's a connect command. You can see, again, 3 different commands that are here and some description of that. The next one is a scaled version where the width of the line is scaled depending on a value that you enter in the table. And then also the colors can be connected to a color scheme like we talked about before. And so what I want to do is show you, again, how would I change this data? Well, first of all, if you have a data set where you have starting data, a starting category, ending category, and a value, you can go ahead and paste that in here just to illustrate how, actually we'll go to this version to illustrate how this would work if I wanted to just add in another group. So say a connection from S to C, I can type that in, but then I do have to give it some a value associated with that. So let's give this one a really large value. We'll make that 20. So now this is the dominant line. And if I make it really big, then all the other lines are going to look really small in comparison. Now, if you go over to the graph that has the colors, then I added in the category C, which is not within the color scheme. So if you go again over to the color scheme, you can see all the categories that are in here. And if I click on the gear menu and do unique text values, now it's going to add the line for S, but I still have to assign the colors if you want to change those. If you want to use, again, the color scheme, you might want to keep the colors you already have. So it doesn't necessarily change all of them unless you want to. But here you go. So now that one's in there with a color as well. And other things that you might want to change here would be the category labels themselves, and that is within the nodes group. So there's a list of all the nodes and the name associated with them. And again, if I change these names, just, I don't know, type in data there. So now there's a label there for the word data, but the line doesn't show because I have to also have that here to show me that connection. So if you're bringing in your own data, you could paste in this list, and this would just be a unique list of every start and end group that you're going to. You can use the slider to change the number of nodes. So you can make this larger, up to 50 nodes, or you can make this much, much smaller. So there's some flexibility here with how this works to let you to customize this file. And the other thing, I guess, that I wanted to just point out was the first graph. Now, this is a pivot command, and I put in here, do not delete, so you don't remove this. This is actually performing the data processing needed for this file. And basically, when I first set this up, I wanted to make sure that in case you had a duplicate connection, to figure out how to process that. So I have here a connection at the top is AJ. If the second one was also AJ, or I had more data for A to J, you can have that listed multiple times. And when you do, it's going to just add that to the connection for that group. So if you wanted to see how is this all calculated, that would be in this combinations group where you can look at the start and the end. Now this is showing you every combination of every group that's in here. So it may, this is overkill in terms of what you're actually plotting, but it's really more towards the data processing. You don't need to mess with this at all if you don't want to, but you can see here how the group AJ has a total of 21. This is now the largest number in terms of a summed value for the combination of, where you starting with, where you ending. Anyway, so if you have duplicates in this, it will take that into account, and the calculations will sum those up across those groups. So you don't really need to do anything with this pivot command. If it's, it's there, it's there. If you are so inclined to use this also for visualization, you can, but it is really more for data processing. So if I were using this file, I would, again, be really focused on just these two groups, that using putting my data into the my data group. It makes sense. And putting the names of my categories into this column, what I wanted those to show within my diagram. And then the other two groups, I can, if I want to see more on how the calculations are done, for example, this is showing me where the points are, how they're calculated, or this group called points is performing the calculation where the X and the Y are located. You certainly can, go into the details of that to see how those are calculated, but you don't have to. You could just kind of use this template as is. Of course, if you have any trouble with it, something's not working the way you would like, then definitely, as always, let us know. This is one that I made with the same approach, and I don't have this on the examples right now, but maybe I need to update this. So this is using that chord diagram. So this is using the connect command. There's a table of countries. This is from Eurovision 2019. I think this looks, pretty cool. This shows you every country, and the circle here, the point is scaled with the number of votes that the countries received. The inner circle is, actually, I can't remember now. One is the jury, one is the fan vote. And then there's also, a plot of the data, and the Netherlands that won in 2019, they had kind of the best of both, the jury votes and the telephone votes. But Norway, for example, had a lot of telephone votes, but not a lot of jury votes. So if you look at where Norway was, you can see the inner circle are the jury votes versus the phone votes. And just showing every country, who voted for who. So it's sort of an interesting way of using that. And, once this was set up, although I have not done this, I really should, not too bad to just update it and add in the new set of data. And I did this, just sort of played with this in a variety of different ways. Oh, I think I even have a, maybe I don't. Now, I thought I had something here where I also could go through the different countries, but maybe that's in another version of this file that I was working on. Or is it this? Here it is. Yeah. So you can even I have one command where the whether it's shown or not, it has a mask, and it would allow you to, if you're trying to, again, highlight, here's Norway, here's, where the votes that it received versus other countries. You can kind of see Iceland did well that year, so had that in there. Anyway, so anything else? And no one has any other questions? I'm just chit-chatting today quite a bit. Here's the same one with the lines straight. So you don't have to have them curved. I think the curved look has kind of, I think it's pretty sleek, but you don't have to do that. You can have straight lines. And again, here, these are all using, this color schemes that are in here, grouped also in the variables. That's something, in case you, weren't aware of that, you can group the data, you can group the variables, and you can group the commands. So I think that's all for today. And, welcome you to go ahead and explore those files and let us know if you see anything that looks like it could use an updating. Here's just, I don't know, something that's sort of artistic. When I get into these types of files where I'm creating all these interesting connections with this connect command, I find it just can be a time sink in terms of doing different things and creating, different types of graphs. So this is really just, I think, kind of an interesting one with just black and white, not even labeling it, but looks kind of cool. So I hope everyone is doing well and has a good weekend. And we have not scheduled our next webinars. Actually, what's going on next month is the 30-day chart challenge on Twitter. I participated in that last year, and it was fun. I did manage to get all 30 days doing a graph for that. I'm hoping to try and do something similar this year, although I had a tendency to really get into every graph and spend a lot of time on them. So maybe I won't quite have them be as sophisticated as I did last year, but I am planning to post some graphs for that on my own Twitter feed, which is at Pam's Data. And what else did I want to say about that? So I would encourage other people too, to try it out. I was actually thinking about doing a webinar, just not scheduled, I think, on Friday, but another one where I would just talk about my approach to making the graphics for that, how to set up kind of a template that you can use for putting things on Twitter and how you go about that. I actually did, a bunch of webinars on that last year too. So anyway, so I'm not anticipating us having a webinar every Friday next month. I'm also going to have a little bit of travel next month, so I'm looking forward to that. And but we will certainly be posting some videos, and we'll be posting the recording of this. And in the meantime, I hope you're doing well again. And I'll go ahead and let me just stop